Coming up on the launch.
I go back a long way. I suppose personality-wise, I'm very obsessive and I'm very competitive. I remember well, I think I borrowed £75 from my father and we had a go. Of course, ignorance is bliss, and the first shares we bought went down. Do you realise that if you sell out for £1 million, we will get £100,000? Are you happy with that?
Hi, welcome to The Launch, a podcast by founders, for founders, and today we've got Colin Glass joining us as a guest. Welcome to the show, Colin.
Thank you very much indeed.
So for anyone that doesn't know Colin, he's been involved in hundreds of different businesses over the years, accountancy background, one of the most well-connected people who I know, and who's been phenomenally helpful for me over the time that I've known him as well. You know, without trying to spoil your story, for anyone that's interested, can you give us a bit of an overview of your background?
Yeah, I go back a long way, but I suppose personality-wise, I'm very obsessive and I'm very competitive, which comes through in what we started doing. But I had a good friend who was an accountant or training to be an accountant, and we were in our late teens. I didn't know what I really wanted to do, but through him, I got interested in the accountancy side to start with. Not that I knew what it all meant, but I did a degree in economics and accounting. But at the same time, the two of us started a little business which was giving investment advice in an era where there was no real regulation, but we thought it was common sense because we were dealing with our friends and friends of friends. We were working on a commission basis, but we weren't selling our soul for a bit of commission. But that was quite helpful, as neither of us had very much money at the time, and when you were an article clerk, you didn't get much money in any case. But this friend of mine, Melvin Wimburn, who became, apart from being a very good friend and still is, my partner in the business, he got me interested in the stock market. And what it was called stagging new issues. In those days, different world. Some of the well-known companies of today were going public, and in order to go public, one of the things you had to do was put a full-page advert in the Financial Times with a little application form, and anybody could attach their check and apply for some shares. And with supply and demand, usually they were oversubscribed, and you went into a ballot, and if you were pulled out of the ballot and got some shares, the shares usually went up, and you could make some quick money. I thought this was a brilliant idea, and we watched it, and it happened with household names that were going public at the time. And then we had a go. I remember well, I think I borrowed £75 from my father, and we had a go. Of course, ignorance is bliss, and the first shares we bought went down. However, we persevered, and I got very interested in what was happening on the stock market, particularly from a personality at that time called Jim Slater, who had an investment bank called Slater Walker. And what he used to do was find small public companies that were really private companies in disguise in a way, sleepy companies, and he used to approach them and say, you're a public company, you should be operating and getting the market to recognize you, and therefore the share price will increase. And if you let me buy a stake in your company, I can revamp the company and we can all be happy. And he created his investment bank by doing this, finding small companies and building them up and putting his lieutenants in to run them, and they become large public companies. And he sort of created a lot of similar companies who tried to do the same thing as him. One of those was in Leeds, a company called PR Grimshaw, which was a small investment bank, and I went to work for them, and it was like sort of working my hobby. I really enjoyed it. But at the same time, we had our part-time business. Also, I was doing some part-time work and a Walter Mitty existence, giving advice to small companies. And in the end, Melvin and myself decided we'd like to go it alone. He had a very good job, and I was quite happy at Grimshaw's, but we decided we'd start our own business. We had, at that time, one other client who was a market trader but was going into retailing, and it was opening a shop in a new shopping centre in Crossgates, and he gave us a little office above his shop, and he was a client, and he very kindly introduced us to all sorts of people. So we started that way. But we didn't have enough really for two of us, and we wanted to be hands-on with our clients. So we sort of needed an anchor man, and we brought in a third guy who called David Norfolk. The two of us, Melvin and myself, we were still single. He was married with two young kids and a mortgage. But he nevertheless threw his lot into us, and we created Wimburn Glass Norfolk, which was our firm of chartered accountants that we started. But as I say, I was very obsessed with what I'd learnt on the stock market, but I had no money. But I had this idea that because we had to deal mainly with startups, because in those days accountants weren't allowed to advertise, it's all changed now. So what I suggested to my partners, much to their horror, I said, in certain cases, if we find an interesting company that we can get involved with, we'll risk our fees and take a small sweat equity stake in the company. And they were a bit dubious about this, but I was insistent that that's what I wanted to do. We started looking for, well, we were not looking for companies. Some of the companies that came to us, or the startups, if we thought they were good, we would suggest this to them. And one in particular we suggested, which really set the tone for what happened in the future. That was a guy called David Tong, and he was a research assistant at Leeds University, but he had a hobby business. And in electronics, he was a radio ham, and he designed something that he thought he could sell. In those days, there was no internet; everything was through magazines, specialist magazines. And he designed this piece of equipment, and we started selling it on mail order. And then he designed other things. The business started to pick up, so much so that he gave up his job at the university and started. And during this time, we were advising him. We had 10% of the equity. And all I said was, when we started out, now, do you realise that if you sell out for £1 million, we will get £100,000? Are you happy with that? And when he's sitting at the kitchen table, when hasn't really started the business, and he said, yeah, that's fine. And we went on a journey together that went from being a radio ham. He designed a piece of equipment that was of use to the Ministry of Defence. They came along to see us, and it was in covert tracking, and that sort of revolutionised things for us. Unfortunately, we couldn't talk about it because I won't say it was top secret, but it was certainly not something we could talk about. But the person from the MOD was very helpful and supported us throughout their contacts in Europe, and through this product and some various products, the company grew and grew. And in the end, cutting a long story short, we sold it to a subsidiary of Hambros Bank, and our 10% stake became worth quite a bit. Now, you always talk about your successes, but that sets us on this track, and not many other people were prepared to do this because of the risks they're taken. And believe me, most of them do not work. But those that do, with our advice and help and contacts over the years, and as we grew, we got more we got more knowledgeable. We certainly got more contacts, and there were a few more companies that we helped along the way. Some we took from startup to flotation on the AIM market, which was the second tier of the stock market, and we got quite well known for it. And at the same time, we were growing the practice so that we could earn a living at the same time. So that's a brief background to how we got.
Yeah, very good. I mean, I always knew that you were into accountancy, but I didn't know some of the specifics. I guess how did that? I mean, what I know you for now is supporting startups and scale ups with getting off the ground, and through a mixture of business advice or advice for sweat equity. So how did you kind of transfer that to kind of what you're doing now? And I guess how many startups do you tend to be involved with on a year-to-year basis?
Well, going all the way back again, I mean, when we started out, didn't have that much experience, but we had more than the people starting up, particularly on the financial side of it, which is so important to a business. Financial control from the outset is very, very important. So in that first example, and there are many more, and this is, we haven't got hours to talk about it, but in that particular example, we were effectively the financial director, and we took all that on board to help. But I was always a believer in explaining things to my colleagues who were non-financial people, because they don't need to know the detail, but they do need to know what it all means. That is more so now than ever before. So we gave advice, and because we were mixing in different businesses, we gained experience that we could pass on in all aspects of business. And as we moved forward, we got more and more contacts, and we could leverage those contacts in helping other businesses. And we've continued that for many decades. And obviously, the further we went on, the more contacts we got, and that made it better. But I think the key thing in all the companies that we've helped, and I stress again, you only get a few what might be called winners, the few that really make it. Most of them, sadly, for all sorts of reasons, either don't make it and go bust, or just become lifestyle businesses, all sorts of things. But only a few will really, really make it. And I think it's always down to the person, the entrepreneur who's running the business. Yeah, he's got to be able to have that flair, that skill, that resilience, be prepared to work 24/7 mentally and sometimes physically, but also to accept advice and to work on that advice. And I think that is the important thing.
Absolutely, yeah. You've seen, a lot of businesses and a lot of founders, and you've seen businesses that have done well and businesses that have not done well. What would you say sets those businesses and people apart?
Well, as I say, it is the personality of the entrepreneur, and sometimes you wouldn't think that they are. When you start out, you think, well, they've got a lot to learn. Everybody's got a lot to learn. We're all learning, but some of them blossom quite quickly, and remarkable. They don't start out thinking they're going to be successful entrepreneurs, but they end up like that because, as I say, they take the advice and they've got the drive and the resilience, and they want to make it. So, yeah, I think that's the important thing.
Absolutely. And so, again, quite a lot of what you're doing now is supporting startups with getting off the ground. So, I guess for anyone that is an early stage founder of a business that they want to establish and scale, what would be the general advice that you would give to them of what they can do to make sure that they have got the best possible foundation for success for their business?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, they've got to research the marketplace. If they've got an idea or a product that they want to design and manufacture, they've really got to research the marketplace, because they may think it's a good product, they may think it's a unique product, but rarely, it's very rare that you find things that are completely unique. There's competition out there. That's not a bad thing, but you've got to know what the competition is, and you've got to prepare by ensuring that at each stage you work out the timing of it all, the cost of it all, and how you're going to fund that operation. And that's where, and I would say this, wouldn't I? But this is why you need to have people who have got experience that you can bounce your ideas off and gain from their experience where you might slip up. But there's always risk in business. You can't escape the risk, and often it's things that you don't even think about. And even now things crop up that unique things that have never happened before, but in most cases it's things that happen again and again in business. So that's why advice is very important, and it needs to be from someone who's been there and done it themselves and experienced these things that can go wrong, as well as all the things that make a business. So I think researching the marketplace, making sure you've got the right kind of finance for the business, and making sure that you can sell the product or the service in a time scale that'll enable you to sort of get through those hard early years where everything takes longer than you expect.
Mm. What are the top reasons that you see that companies are unsuccessful?
Well, again, because often they jump into something without doing this research, and the opposite again, with they don't have the sufficient finance, they're underfunded, or they expect too much. If they're employing people, they employ them too early often, and that's a costly exercise. So it's a sort of movable feast in a way. Everything every day is different. You've got to build on it, do your preparation, and then just make sure that you're controlling things physically, whether it's designing and manufacturing a product. There are always problems that crop up, or in a new IT idea or something. It always takes longer creating a platform than you expect, and you can run out of money, and that's the end of the line. So I think you've got to, it's all about preparation.
Yeah. How would you say that founders can build readiness for having their own business? If someone's thinking about starting up their own business, thinking about the skills and the experience that they need to build to give them the best possible chance, what advice would you give them?
Well, fortunately, in recent years, the government have realised that SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, which includes startups, are the lifeblood of the economy and need to be encouraged. So they have brought in sort of tax incentives to encourage people to go into business. But equally, they have encouraged organisations, especially local authority, even at government level, to create things like incubators and accelerators to help small companies where they can get advice in a way that is more, not academic, but in an organised way. So you can go on an accelerator, and it could be, say, a 12-week course, or where they're teaching you all the different aspects of business. And I think that is very, very good. On top of that, there's been a growth in business advisors, some good, some bad. So you've got to know, you should get ask around who might be good in a particular circumstance. So there is a lot more advice now, and it's good to take that advice before you start, and obviously once you have started, to get the right kind of advice to take you through. And there's more on the internet now. You can virtually get any initial advice and background to most things, and I think that's something that wasn't there 30, 40 years ago. There was nothing like that. So there is a lot available there. And also there's been a lot of books written by entrepreneurs or coaches that are some are well worth reading, and others not so good, but there's a lot out there.
Any that you recommend?
not off the top of my head.
Yeah,
I'm
no
sorry
worries.
about that. No.
Yeah, no worries.
But,
Always worth an
yeah.
ask.
It's also entertainment, but with serious entertainment like reality TV shows such as Dragon's Den and The Apprentice, for example.
Yeah.
But you've got to remember they are supposed to be entertainment, but equally there's a lot of interesting stuff there.
Yeah.
As long as you take a balanced view about it.
Yeah. And I guess the way that kind of one of the ways that we've come together recently was through both investing in the same business together. And
Yeah.
I couldn't help but notice all of the different businesses that you were involved in when there was when there was that shared. Really impressed with that. And obviously, when I researched you in the past, some of the businesses that you've exited, including is it the Business Desk? Is that right?
Yeah, the Business Desk I was one of the founders of, and they're a great team now. It went through, as any small business, ups and downs, and ran out of money, but then found an investor. And the team that they've got now is really good, who are effectively have done a management buyout. But when you think it started from an idea by David Parkin, who was a well-respected business editor at the Yorkshire Post, a marketing person, Paul Snape, great ideas, but and a great case study how it's so difficult, to we kicked it off well. Then we needed to find the right kind of advertising in the right kind of timescales, and that took time. And also we needed to open in various regional areas, which has all now happened, and it's in 5 different areas and doing very well under the present management. So that was really interesting, and I'm not directly involved with them, but I'm still quite close to them because I think it is a great business.
Yeah, very good. And then you were telling me about Nortec earlier.
Nortec, yeah, another interesting business that has done well. It was a client of mine that was looking to buy a business. He'd been in senior management in a bigger company, and we looked around and we found a company in Huddersfield that was in curtain walling and glazing, and that he'd been in that industry. We bought that about 16, 17 years ago. Construction's not easy, but that business is now doing pretty well, and we have created a maintenance business, and we're selling doors. But it's down to the people, and the key people there and the team around them are really good. And I'm still non-exec there, but we're proud of what's been achieved there.
Very good. First of all, I'd recommend that anyone that's interested in starting up or scaling up a startup get in touch with you, because you've been incredibly helpful to me, and you've introduced me to so many other people that have been really helpful. I think for any investors that are interested in a good source of of startup opportunities as well, you've been great from that perspective as well.
Well, it's kind of you to say so, but I mean, I find it hard to say no. And in fact, a good friend of mine made me put that on my phone, just say no. I find it very hard because I'm really interested in entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs who are starting out. I'm an avid networker, as many people know, and I'm still doing that. And I recommend that anybody who's going into business needs to network to build their contacts and build relationships. But no, I enjoy it still. I'm not under the same pressure as when I had a payroll to worry about, because we merged our accountancy firm with a bigger firm 5.5 years ago, just before COVID. We didn't see COVID coming, but it was the best thing that happened, because we were all getting older. My partners, some were retiring, some sadly were not so well. But I just wanted to carry on doing what I was always doing, which is helping small companies. And, it's enjoyable, it's time consuming, it's challenging. and you meet some great people along the way. So I've met you, yeah, I mean the business we met over really is a classic case of, I think we believe is a good entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur, and the other people involved. Coincidentally, I've known them for many years, and we all sort of came together. And I think as a team, it will be good. And that's race competitions, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Radion Racing. With James Merrills, he was one of the guests that we had on in the early part of the series. Part of the other thing that you've seemed phenomenally well experienced in, and with a good base of contacts in is fundraising as well. So I guess the nature of a lot of startups is they require investment to get going, and your knowledge of angel investor networks and also of different ways of getting grant funding and stuff like that has been super interesting. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, part of any business is getting the right kind of funding. Over the years, you do make contacts, either initially with banks. I mean, the banking industry has changed dramatically. You don't get relationship managers like you used to have who could take a decision, look you up and down and think, well, this guy's worth of backing. Now it's a whole different. But equally, not just banks, but all sorts of organisations, particularly in the venture capital field, which has grown, and in the business angel field. So you can't have too many contacts, really, because these venture capitalists, some are only interested in the smaller end of the market, but what they think is the smaller end of the market is still a high basis to start with. But it's about building relationships with them and knowing somebody there. So a warm introduction is always better. Also, in terms of banking, there's now a new range of banks, the challenger banks, relatively smaller banks, but well-funded banks, and they're all looking for clients, really. I mean, the big four banks are more difficult to deal with now for smaller companies. Whatever they say in the press, it's a bit different. You've just got to build those relationships. The other thing which I was very, very fortunate, because of my background, I got the opportunity to join the board of the British Business Bank, which was the government organisation for getting funding into startups, SMEs, smaller companies who are finding it difficult to get funding from the normal sources. And that was an eye-opener for me because it was at a different level that I've been used to. But the people you met and what I learned in those 3 years as a non-exec there was tremendous. And during that time, one of the initiatives that they brought in, thanks to George Osborne, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer then, he coined the phrase the Northern Powerhouse, which was to try and get the economies in the north getting better compared with what was going on in the south of England. And one of the things that happened was that he suggested that the British Business Bank should start a fund, an investment fund for northern companies, and they started the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund, and that is for investing in small companies, or both providing debt funding and equity funding for startups and smaller companies, and that is doing very well. They've just had a second raise of £660 million for doing this, and it's always worth looking, if you're a small company, seeing if you fit the criteria for what they're offering.
Because I've noticed they do, is it up to £10,000 or £20,000 for startups, and you go through a process of doing a business plan and whatever, and cash flow forecast?
They run startup loans now. I mean, it's a development bank, so it's all done through other parties. So, for instance, they will after looking in detail at the proposal, they might put £40 million into a venture capital fund, or they may put money into people who are a fund that's running invoice discounting. So that, but they, in order to get the market going for smaller companies, and one of the things they do is the startup loans through various companies. One locally is the Business Enterprise Fund, and you can get they actually lend it to the directors for putting into the company. That's the way they do it, and it's up to £25,000 per director. So if there's 4 directors in, it is possible to get £100,000, and that is, I think now, 6% interest over 5 years, and it's well worth looking at. To see if you fit the bill.
Very good. I met Kat Smith, I think it is, from the British Business Bank recently.
Kat is the local representative, the sort of manager for this region. Very good, very capable lady. Yeah,
very good. I was aware of the Northern Powerhouse joint funds. My understanding of that is typically what the British Business Bank does is they invest into funds that then invest into.
That's what I'm
normally
saying,
jointly invested with VCs, I guess.
No, they put their money. I mean, it's quite a complex organisation now, and I've sort of not lost touch with them entirely, but they've got many initiatives, and they continue to find new initiatives to help small companies. So they do various joint things and invest directly, but in the main they are investing in other funds, venture capital funds, and they use managers to say for the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund, which operates both sides of the Pennines. They've got fund managers at this side it's Mercia, and the other side of the Pennines, I think it's Prytura, and they've got various fund managers who sort of look at the proposals that come, the businesses that are put forward to them, and decide whether or not, they should lend or invest the money in them.
Yeah, very good. Interesting. Thank you very much for coming on and sharing some of your background and some of what's made you successful, and also some advice for other people. I'm interested to know if there's any kind of parting words of wisdom or advice that you would give to people that are aspiring entrepreneurs or founders over and above what we've said already.
I think, first of all, you've got to accept there is going to be risk. However good your idea is, there's going to be risk, and you've got to be prepared to take that risk. You have got to be 100% committed to what you're doing. I would say you've got to take advice from the right sources, and you've got to be able to take the knocks, because there will be knocks along the way. You've got to be resilient. You've got to be passionate about what you're trying to do, and gather a team around you as you grow that can add value to what you're doing. So those are a few of the things that I think I would put on.
Thank you very much for your time anyway, and for sharing some of that with us all. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion that we've had. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts and feedback. Hopefully see you on the next one. Cheers.